Hello and welcome to our December 11th webinar introducing our new Extranet Publisher product. My name is Peter Carson. I'm going to be your presenter for the next hour or so. It might be a little less, a little more. This is actually the first time I've done this session, so we'll see how the timing goes on it. I'm the president of Extranet User Manager as well as Envision IT. I'm also a SharePoint MVP, or as we're currently known, Office Services and Apps, I believe is the current term, and a partner seller with Microsoft Canada. We're going to be posting a recording of this webinar as well as the slide deck up on the event page, so you have access to all my credentials and information and all the slides as part of that. Before we get into today's topic, I just want to give a little background on Extranet User Manager for those of you that are not familiar. The product actually goes back about 10 years. We originally built it as a custom extranet solution for a number of our clients, and we did that for probably 5-6 years or so, and then decided, you know what, we've done this a number of times, we should really productize it. So back in 2011, 2012, we started to productize the code base and promote it as a standalone product. It wasn't until about 3 years ago, 2015, though, that we launched out the Extranet User Manager brand and website and really started promoting the product as a separate standalone product from the Envision IT services brand that we have. We've added in B2B support, a channel program, and today I'm pleased to announce that we're going to be releasing our Extranet Publisher product. So we'll get into that in a bit more detail in a second, just to continue on a bit on the background. The Extranet User Manager product is used globally. We've got about 75 customers around the world, a lot in North America, but some in Europe, Asia, a little bit in Australia as well. Now, before I get into the presentation itself, it's always helpful for me as a presenter. I know it's not a two-way vehicle for the most part as a webinar, but I'd like to do a couple of little polls here and just get a sense of the attendees. So let me just open this up here. And the first poll that I'd like to collect is just to get a sense of if you're using SharePoint today, and I'm assuming you probably are, because Extranet Publisher is all about taking content from SharePoint and publishing it out into Azure websites, IIS websites, and such from there. So today, are you using Office 365? Are you on SharePoint Server 2016? Actually, I should update this list because SharePoint Server 2019 is now out in general availability, 2013, 10, or MOS 2007. So I'll leave that open for a minute, just to get everybody a chance to respond to that. There we go. And let me actually just share that out with the group. So about 2/3 on Office 365. That number just keeps getting bigger and bigger every time we do these one-on-one webinars. Surprisingly, quite a few on SharePoint Server 2016. So that's cool to see that people are current on the on-premises version. Some on 2013, 2010, and a few back on 2007 or Windows SharePoint Services as well. So the topics I'm going to be talking about today, while it's primarily intended for publishing content from Office 365, it actually works just as well, and we have clients using it from a SharePoint on-premises point of view as well. So let me hide that poll. We've got one more that I want to do, which is regardless of what version of SharePoint you're using, I want to get a sense of how you're using that. Is it from an internal collaboration point of view? Are you using it from an intranet perspective, which is a pretty common workload for SharePoint? Do you have an extranet today on SharePoint, or are you doing your public-facing website on SharePoint as well? And again, I'll just give you a minute to go through that. Okay, let me close that out. Share that back as well again. So lots of folks using it from both an internal collaboration point of view and an internal publishing internet perspective. A good chunk, almost half from an extranet's point of view, and a few using it from a public-facing website's point of view. So the Extranet Publisher is really for those second two workloads, whether you've got an extranet or a public-facing website. How can you do that securely and from Office 365 out to Azure or other platforms like that? So let me close this out and come back to my deck. Okay. So I'm just going to start level setting a bit first from a point of view of what a public website, what an extranet is, make sure everybody's familiar from that point of view. A public website, when we say that term, we're really talking about an anonymous site. So it's a site that anybody can come to. It's typically from a marketing point of view or an information distribution point of view where you're not worried about who's coming into the site. There's no security on it. And SharePoint works quite well from that point of view. In the past, we've built a lot of public-facing websites on SharePoint, where SharePoint provides the content management system for authoring the site, and then delivers the content out from there. Now, in the Office 365 world, that's a challenge because there actually isn't a public website option from that point of view, and that's really where the Extranet publisher came from. Then the other scenario I want to talk about is from an extranet point of view. So an extranet is also a website externally published, available to people outside of your corporate network, but it is private. There is some sort of sign-in or authorization, authentication that needs to happen before you can come into that. Now, it could be just an extension of your public-facing website. It could be a portion of your corporate internet that you want to publish out externally, or it could be a standalone purpose-built extranet. So when we talk about extranets, there's really two styles of extranets that we talk about. One is what we call collaborative versus publishing. And collaborative is typically where you need to work with people on documents. Imagine a project site that you've got going. You've got some external parties that are working on that project with you. They need to be able to co-author documents and upload, download documents, edit things. And typically that's an invitation only, although there are scenarios where there may be self-registration as part of that. That one really needs to stay in Office 365. In that scenario, we're not going to be focusing on from a extranet publisher point of view. It's really the right-hand side where we've got the publishing model. It may be a secure website, or it could actually have an anonymous section to it. Self-registration is very common, but it's really about pushing private content out. How do we publish this content out to a broader audience? They don't need to necessarily interact with that. There might be some limited feedback. Maybe you want them to be able to like or comment on things that are in the portal. Maybe they can upload some files in there, but it's not like they're going to be doing full co-authoring on Word and PowerPoint documents that you have in the portal. It's really about pushing that content out to them. And profile management is often an important part of that as well. So like I mentioned, in Office 365, it's really, there's no public websites in there. Yes, you can do external sharing to create an extranet on Office 365, and we give lots of talks and scenarios around that. We definitely support that, but there are models where that just doesn't make sense to bring those people into Office 365. So it's an alternative way to do that, and ideally, if you're already in the cloud with Microsoft, how can you still keep that in the cloud? And really what we focus on is using Azure websites for this. And this is what the focus of today's talk is going to be, is that an Azure website is managed by Microsoft. It's a very scalable, cost-effective way to host your website, but there is no CMS. There's no content management system. So it's not like you can, as you do in SharePoint, just start creating pages and authoring and publishing content and approvals and things like that. None of that exists. It's very much a roll your own from that point of view. So in our scenario, what we're suggesting is, well, why don't we leverage your Office 365 or even your SharePoint on-premises for doing that? We have some clients that have their public-facing websites on SharePoint on-premises, but for security reasons, they've kept that in a separate farm from their intranet internal SharePoint. So they're actually running two SharePoint farms, one for the external public website and another for their intranet. We could actually reduce that to say, well, let's not have you manage all that on-premises infrastructure for the public-facing one. Use your intranet to author the content and have it push out to an Azure website from there. So that's a scenario we're working with some of our clients on as well. So that's just some background on how we want to position this scenario. Now, like I said, it could be a public-facing website. It could be an extranet that they're coming into. There's lots of different folks that could be. Maybe you've got a member site, a customer or vendor portal, suppliers, your board of directors, your government organization you need to outreach to citizens. These are all scenarios that could come in from an extranet point of view. So there's a number of questions that we go through as we're working with organizations to understand what type of extranet we're going to be building for them. And these questions pretty much apply to anybody that we're considering this with. And the first really is, going back to that previous slide, who's coming into the extranet? And once they come in there, does everyone see the same information? If you're building a customer portal and a board of directors portal, obviously, that's very different information. You need to make sure that the security is in place, that only the appropriate people see the appropriate content. Is there some sort of member database to interface with? A lot of our clients have tens of thousands of external users, and maybe they're using Dynamics CRM or Salesforce or Blackbout from a charitable organization point of view, to manage that member database. So can we connect that in with the Extranet portal is a key decision that we need to understand. The next one is it invitation only, or can people self-register? This really means, invitation only is I know who the people are that I want to come into my extranet, and I'm going to explicitly invite them, and they're going to get an email and sign into the extranet, and away they go from there. Versus self-registration, we don't know who those people are. We want them to be able to self-register, enter in their profile information. Maybe we go through an approval process, maybe we don't. It depends on the scenario. If we do, how does that approval work? Who approves those new registrations? And then is it just this Azure website extranet that they're going to be coming into, or are there other systems? Is there a single sign-on to multiple systems that needs to come in as part of that as well? So those are all parts of the aspects of it. So the first scenario that I'm going to take you through is a very simple one, and it actually doesn't require our product. So this is something you can take as a learning, say, we could apply this in our own environment and make use of it today. So the scenario is for Wilfrid Laurier University, located in Waterloo, Ontario, Brantford campus, a couple of other campuses spread around as well. Lots of students, 19,000 plus students, about 1,500 staff and faculty. And basically what the ask was from Laurier was, well, we've got this legacy website that people publish documents to. So let's say I'm an academic, I've written a book, and there's a bunch of supporting documents and electronic files that I want to distribute as part of my book. I need to publish those somewhere. So they would, email those documents to somebody in the IT department who would put them up on this legacy public site, and it was just difficult to manage that whole process. So really they wanted a spot to keep this. So downloads.wl.ca was the legacy, and we actually retained that and said, okay, let's build a better front end in front of that. Let's not have that manually maintained by the web services team. Let's let the business, the academics, the administrative people self-manage their content through there. So what we did was we built an area of their staff portal in Office 365 where they can manage that content. And then it goes through a publishing process, and once they mark it as published, it gets pushed out to the public site from there. Now this is a bit of a diagram of what this environment looks like. When we first started talking about it, we were actually going to use Azure as the external publishing for it. And then they said, we've got these Apache servers that are hosting our public-facing sites on a different content management system. Can we just leverage that infrastructure that we've already got in place? And we said, our solution doesn't really care what the end target is, whether it's Azure, whether it's an on-premise server. Absolutely, yeah, we can connect to that Apache server and make that part of the process. So if we look at the top left part of the diagram, the Office 365 and SharePoint, basically it starts by somebody creating a document. They may collaborate on the creation of that document in SharePoint Online, and at some point they're going to put it into a particular library in that SharePoint Online site, go through a publishing approval process, and it's going to push that document out to that Apache server. And at that point, the document becomes publicly available. It generates a link that they can then put into their article, their book, whatever they're publishing, and that becomes a permanent link that's there and available for them. So let's actually have a look at what that looks like. Let me just pull up my browser here. I don't need the Go to Webinar tab anymore. I'm actually going to go to a dev version of this site. So if I remember the URL, I forgot to queue this up before. So it's logging me into Office 365 and taking me over to the download site. Woohoo, I got the right URL. There we go. Okay, so this site is just a SharePoint publishing site. It's got a little bit of content on here kind of explaining to people how to use it. And then the main working area is this downloads document library over on the right-hand side here. So basically what happens if I come into this document library, I can use either the modern or the classic experience through here, and I can upload documents. And you'll see that there's folders for all these different areas. And what we've done is we've assigned permissions back to their Active Directory groups to say, okay, who can publish content into what areas in here. So if I take a sample piece of document, let me just grab a sample off my desktop here. So I can take Windows Explorer, just grab, say, this bulletin.pdf, and drop it over into my browser window. It uploads, that's all out of the box standard SharePoint functionality. Here's my new document that I've got. It's version 1.0, but it hasn't actually gone through an accessibility check date. So one of the things they have to do is confirm that they've done an accessibility review on this to adhere to the university standards. So I need to check off that item. Oh, and actually I need to go back to classic mode. Sorry, let me just get there for a second because we put it into the ribbon. It seems that Microsoft has changed things again on me. Welcome to Office 365. Sorry, I can't seem to get over into classic mode on that. But basically what I need to do is check off that document and go through that accessibility check. In fact, I've got it in the slide deck here. If we go through, basically what would happen is I click this item in the ribbon here to publish to downloads, and it brings up an accessibility compliance form. So I need to fill in my information here, submit that to note that yes, I've gone through this accessibility check, and then that document gets published. If we come back here, you'll see this is actually connected up to Azure, but as part of that publishing process, it generates this public URL here. So that when I hit that URL, I've got a publicly available document link that I can then put into my publication. Now, I may have published something, and then later I decide I want to update that. Well, one of the challenges we have is we want to make sure that people don't eliminate those links that were previously published, and they put the document on top from that point of view. So what we did was we added another feature in here for replace document, which allows them to upload a replacement document over an existing one. Because the challenge is people often rename, they put V2, V3, final version at the end of the file name of their document, but we don't actually want that when it gets onto the portal. We want to make sure it still uses that same URL. So they choose a particular document that they want to replace, and then they upload a new document. And it doesn't matter if the names don't match between those two documents. I still need to go through the compliance check from there, submit that, and it will rename and upload and mark as compliant that document, kind of all in one fell swoop from there. So it's a very easy way to manage that process. Now, I mentioned you could do this entirely yourself without our product, and I just want to explain how that works. So a lot of our solutions, we use Microsoft Flow, and Flow has connectors to connect different systems together. So there's actually an out-of-the-box template flow that I've included the link to here that does exactly this, that when an item is uploaded to a SharePoint library, it again gets pushed over to Azure Blob storage. And once it's in Azure, effectively you've got a URL to that document. You can point people to it, and it can be publicly available from there. You could secure it, you could do more things from that point of view. It takes a little more work from that perspective. And if you want to have things like the accessibility check that I showed you, or maybe an approval step on that, I mean, you can make that all part of your Flow workflow here and drive that whole process through. That's the beauty of Flow. For those of you that haven't used it before, it's a very easy way to build up those multi-step workflows from there. The next scenario that I'm going to show you is a fair bit more complex, and this is a customer case study for Ontario MD. So Ontario MD is a government-funded not-for-profit. Their goal is to foster adoption of electronic medical record systems with physicians across the province of Ontario. There's about 14,000 physicians across there. So their challenge was that they needed a new corporate website and portal as their public face of their organization, but they also needed a secure area to that these physicians could sign into, get private content, and also access some other applications that Ontario MD provides out to the physicians and to their staff. So they wanted it to be cost effective. They were paying a lot for their current system, easy to maintain. There was the migration that needed to happen, not just from a content point of view, but all the existing user accounts. And they wanted the whole thing hosted and managed in the cloud. It was an on-premise previous to this. They really wanted to move to the cloud and be more hands-off from a management point of view. So if you remember the questions that I phrased at the beginning, this is kind of the scenario for Ontario MD. Who's coming into the Extranet for them? It's their physicians and their sponsor staff. There's also some partners and vendors in there, and it's actually been broadened now to a broader set of people for other purposes, so it's quite flexible from that point of view. Does everyone see the same information? Well, there are some specific groups that get some secure content in there, but for the most part, people see the information in there. Is there a member database? Yes, as part of the registration process, we need to confirm that the physicians coming in are actually registered physicians in the province. And the Ontario Medical Association is the sister organization to Ontario MD, which is actually the registration body for physicians. So we actually have some live connections into their systems to check those registrations. It is self-registration, so they can register with a valid OMA number and some personal information to prove they are who they say they are. But then they can actually invite other staff in from there. So if, let's say I'm an administrator or a nurse working in a physician's office, the physician can delegate down to me. I can then access the portal as well. In fact, I can become an administrator and invite other people on behalf of that physician. So it's quite flexible from a registration and onboarding point of view. From an approval point of view, the physicians are auto-approved. We validate against the OMA. The rest are invited in through those approved physician accounts. There's no approvals that need to happen at the Ontario MD side itself, which was important. I mean, 14,000, they're up over 20,000 people in the portal now. There's no way that Ontario MD themselves could validate who each of those people are. And is it just the Extranet? No, they're actually coming into a number of applications that Ontario MD provides to the physicians as well. A very critical one, health card validation, is used to validate that as patients come into a doctor's office, if the doctor doesn't have an EMR that can validate a health card, they can use this website to then do that validation and confirm that, yes, that patient is an Ontario resident, they're qualified for free health care under HIP and through the health plan appropriately. So what does that look like from a before and after point of view? So I mentioned previously they were on an on-premise. It was actually an Oracle WCI platform. But Ontario MD was already an Office 365 customer. So there was no net new cost to go to 365. They were already there. And this is where we see the real value, where clients are already using Office 365 for other purposes. Maybe they have their email on it. Maybe they have their internet on it. Let's just extend another workload onto that. So our proposal was to leverage SharePoint Online as a content management system and to use Azure Web Apps to host the public website and the Extranet. You can actually go to that link yourself. It's live. The site went live about 1.5 years ago. So this technology has been running for some time now. We've got a number of clients running on it currently there. And what does that look like from a financial point of view? Well, their operating costs all in now are less than just their maintenance fees under Oracle. They decommission that dedicated hosting environment, save them a ton of money there. It's very cost effective from that point of view. So basically in the Azure portal, they have what are called 2 standard S2 core servers. So you still get virtual machines or Windows servers dedicated to your application that you're hosting there. But the beauty of it is that it's all patched and maintained by Microsoft. You don't need to worry about keeping those servers up and keeping them current and make sure that you have the appropriate security patches on them. Microsoft takes care of all that. They load balance them for you. If one of those servers goes down, they spin up another one. You're none the wiser. So it's a very hands-off environment from that point of view. And at 220 times 2, so $440 a month, also very, very cost effective. And there's a link there that takes you into the app services. So let's go through a bit of a demo of what that looks like. Let's come back to our browser here. We'll bring up their live production site, www.ontariomd.ca, and this is their site. So one of the things you'll notice as you browse around through the site, let me just kind of bang through different pages here, you'll notice it's very responsive. And the beauty of it is that the content is pre-rendered effectively through the publishing process. So there's very little work that needs to happen on the Azure website side to build that out. The navigation actually comes from the term store navigation in SharePoint, so you can manage all of your navigation, you can manage your friendly URLs that we see up in here. All of that carries through as part of this. We still have roll-ups. If I come into, say, news and events, we've got the ability to roll up articles with dates on them. We can do filtering to show future events versus past events, and we don't need the publishing process to run to update that. It can all be done client-side. So we've got some JavaScript that builds these various different roll-up pages for us in here, and it becomes very flexible from that perspective. We even have the ability to search. We're using the Azure search service to provide full text search of all the documents and all the content in the site. Now this is all public facing content that I've been showing you so far, but there is a public facing side to it, or a extranet side to it as well. So I can come into the sign in link here and it will take us over to our Extranet User Manager product. Now it's been It's been branded, so it has the Ontario MD branding in there. It doesn't look like our product as part of that. If I have an account already, I can sign in. If I don't, I can come to the forgotten password. If I don't remember my credentials, maybe I don't sign in here very often, I put in my email address, request a new password email, and boom, I can go through and reset my password. So it's important to have that self-service component to it. And that applies to the registration side as well. If I come over to the register link here, I mentioned we're linked into the Ontario Medical Association. So I need to provide my OMA number, my date of birth. I can verify that, continue through the registration process, confirm my account, and away I go from there. So very flexible from that point of view. So for clients that were maybe using SharePoint as a public-facing website, we've done this in the past for clients, so we don't actually recommend it going forward just because of the costs associated with it, of actually building that public-facing SharePoint farm in Azure. You can do that, you can spin up the virtual machines for that, but you're going to pay a lot of money for that. And I'm really comparing like for like here. So we've got two different scenarios, a highly available and a non-highly available. So if I want full high availability in SharePoint, I actually need 8 servers to do that. I need 2 web front-end servers, I need 2 app servers, 2 database SQL servers, and 2 domain controllers. So to run those 8 servers in Azure is going to cost me a little over $4,000 a month for that. So that's a lot of coin from that point of view. Plus, I need to spend about $36,000 primarily on SQL licensing, but also some SharePoint server licensing for that. If I want to do non-highly available, where I've only got one of each of those servers, I basically cut those prices in half. There's a little bit of savings on the SQL side as well from a monthly point of view, but again, not insignificant from a cost perspective. Compare that to an Azure website if I want highly available like Ontario MD, which is servicing 20,000 plus users on a daily basis. They've got 2 servers on an S2 plan. They're spending $427 a month for that. It's an order of magnitude cheaper than actually hosting that infrastructure. If I just was happy with non-highly available, $100 a month on an S1 plan, and I'm good to go. I'm actually going to show you our Envision IT and Extranet user manager websites. They're built this way as well. We're running them just on a single S2 plan right now. We don't have high availability turned on there. We launched the Extranet user manager site back in, I think it was June or July. So it's been running for about 4 months now. We've had 0% downtime over that 4 months. It's been 100% uptime. So they won't guarantee your uptime unless you do a highly available plan. They'll guarantee 99.5% uptime in that scenario. But even in the non-highly available, we've seen absolutely no downtime as part of that. We have a monitoring service that monitors our sites every couple of minutes and haven't seen any outages from that point of view. And we quite often had outages on our on-premises. We'd have issues with our SharePoint servers themselves or with our proxy that published them out to the internet. There's just a lot of infrastructure involved in doing that. It's much simpler and much easier doing that with the Azure websites. So if we look at what this looks like in Ontario MD's scenario, so on the left-hand side, we've got the content authoring experience. I haven't shown you that yet, so we'll go over that in a minute. And then on the right-hand side, we have the Azure website, the Azure search that anonymous users can come into, and I can sign into as an authenticated Ontario MD user as well. So that's really how it all wires together. Authoring happens on the left. There's a publishing job that runs every 15 minutes that pushes the content over onto the Azure website on the right. In the end result, we've got the site that you see at www.ontariomd.ca. So let's actually have a look at their authoring portal for a minute here. So if I go to didn't get that right. Sorry. Give me 1 second here. Looks better. So our goal when we build the authoring sites is to make them as close as possible to the publishing site itself. So they're not pixel perfect. There's always going to be slight differences in terms of the rendering between SharePoint and basically it's a .NET Core to a website that we've built in Visual Studio that we host out in Azure. But you can see here, we took you around a tour of the Ontario MD site on their live site. Now, bear in mind, this is the development version, not the production version of their authoring environment. So it looks a little different from a content point of view, but the same navigation is there. The same elements are on the pages through here. And if I want to come into a particular document here, oops, dev sites don't always work the way they should. Let's actually just pull up something simple like a company overview. So I still get the same friendly URLs that we were seeing. I see my content in here. But you can see here it's actually showing me some of the CMS features. It's saying, hey, this actually has been edited, but it hasn't been published yet. So visitors can't see this. And this is still true that visitors to the public-facing site won't see this because they haven't gone through the publishing process on it. So I would need to come in here and go through that publish approval process. Now, you still have the full flexibility of approval workflows as well, and we've done that on the Ontario MD scenario, where certain content, when somebody marks it to be published, it then goes to the communications team for approval. They approve it. It gets marked as published in SharePoint, and that's what triggers it to publish it out to the public website. Other areas, the business unit wants to have a pre-approval step as well. So when it gets marked to be published, it first goes to somebody at the business. They approve it. Then it goes to the communications team. They approve it. Then it goes out to the public site from there. So you can build all those workflows. You've got all the same power of SharePoint from a CMS and approvals processes point of view available to you. The end result is once it's marked as published in SharePoint, that's when it triggers to publish across to the public site. So let's actually take you through a couple of other scenarios through here. I mentioned our public-facing website. So if you go to our envisionit.com site or to our Extranet user manager, these are shortcuts, um.co, eit.co will take you to these sites. You'll see they're public-facing sites. They also respond very well, just like we see on the Ontario MD scenario, and they're built in the exact same way. So if I come back to our main SharePoint Online portal, we've actually put links in our marketing navigation here to say, hey, I want to edit the Envision IT website. Let me just go ahead and click that, or my EUM website. And again, just like in the Ontario MD scenario, we see a site that looks very similar to the public-facing site that I do my authoring in. So if I want to come down into maybe my resources and events, I'll see my roll-ups. And here's today's webinar. We're going to be editing this later today to put in the recording, to put in the presentation download. So we'll remove this register for webinar. We'll put in the download links, and that's all done just through the page editing and then the publishing process through here. So it's all very easy to do from that perspective. Even the URLs you'll see here, we've used the same URL convention. So I'm in /site/www.extranetusermanager.com. If I actually take the beginning part of that off, and just hit that link, boom, now I'm on the live public-facing version of that site. So it's very easy for content authors to kind of flip between one and the other, understand, okay, I'm authoring this one. When I mark it as published, then it becomes available over on the other side there. In fact, we've done some interesting integrations. If I bring up SiteImprove for a minute. SiteImprove is a commercial service that we use to QA our sites, both from a broken link and quality point of view, an SEO perspective, and even from a, sorry, let me just get this set up here. And from an accessibility point of view as well. So I've got a number of features through here. I can look at our various different sites from an accessibility perspective, from a QA point of view, from an SEO point of view. In fact, we've got a little bit of work we've got to come back to. We just got this fully lit up on our Extranet User Manager site. So if I look, say, for a summary of links on our EUM site, let me pull that open. We can see we've got some pages with broken links in here. So I can open up this particular page. It's got 2 broken links on it. This is actually an interesting article page that we maintain of links to Microsoft articles on B2B. And looks like Microsoft has taken some of these articles down, so it's flagging this as a broken link in here. So we need to go back and edit that. What we've done is we've set up deep links in SiteImprove to explain to it when you find these broken links on our public site. If I click this Edit in CMS here, you'll see there it's actually taken me back to SharePoint, right to that page that has the broken link on it. I can fix it, I can publish it, I can rerun the crawl in SiteImprove, boom, I'm good to go from there. So really cool how you can build some nice integrations from that point of view. So that's two of our sites. Third one that I wanted to talk about today is still a work in progress, but something I want to share with you is a site called Shakespeare. So let me come to our public-facing site for a minute here. You can access it by just adding Shakespeare to the end of our URL. It's basically an open source project that we've run for quite a number of years of how do we build a public-facing website on SharePoint. And this was back in the days when we actually used SharePoint itself to directly publish that site. So we've done some work updating to that. We're still working through some of the details on it. We're going to publish a new GitHub version of this shortly that allows you to do both sides of this. We're going to include both the .NET Core website to run on Azure, as well as the SharePoint website to work with from a content authoring point of view. So if we start over on here, we go to our Shakespeare site. So the reason I chose Shakespeare is actually from a content point of view, there's a ton of content available through there. So if I bring up my page library here for a second, we've got about 1,000 odd pages of content in here because we've got all of Shakespeare's works loaded up in here. You know, it's long out of copyright protection. It's effectively open source from that point of view. So we don't need to worry about providing appropriate content through there. And we've done some interesting things from a metadata point of view. So if I want to look at, you know, the plays that Shakespeare has written, I can bring up a list of all the various different plays, and we've actually done some metadata tagging. You know, what genre do they fall into? Is it a comedy? Is it a tragedy? Is it a history? And so forth from there. And then we have pages for each of the scenes. So if you think about All's Well That Ends Well, you know, it's got a number of acts and scenes associated in there that are tagged back to the work that they belong to. You know, if we drill into that actual content, we can actually see the full text of Shakespeare's works as part of that. So we loaded all that content up in there. We also loaded up our own news and media articles, kind of imagining that we were a fictional Shakespeare theater company. It's kind of our approach of Contoso or AdventureWorks, if you're familiar with the standard Microsoft ones there. So we've got all this content loaded up in SharePoint, and then we want to be able to access it from an Azure website point of view. So if I go to shakespeare.envisionit.com, this is actually our Azure website version of that. So you can see some of the roll-ups we have on news and media spotlight. I can work through different content that we've got in here. A lot of it is just lorem ipsum. Chrome wants me to translate. It doesn't seem to understand what lorem ipsum is. But I can actually come down into the works and say, okay, well, I'm looking for a comedy, you know, All's Well That Ends Well. Here's all the acts and scenes. I can drill down into those. You know, so all that roll-up content is driven off the metadata that we've put in there and drives the structure of the site from there. So the content author doesn't need to build all that out. They just tag the content in the appropriate way and it all fits together. So it's a good way to explain to people why metadata is important and how you can use it to guide the journey through your website from that perspective. So if we look under the hood on this, I'm going to get geeky here for a minute and show you some code. We've got our Azure Shakespeare website here. So I've actually loaded this up locally. I can run a local version of it. And it's, like I said, a .NET Core 2.0 website that's built out from there. So we're going to open source this whole website project out as part of this. And then we have the content publishing job that basically takes the content from SharePoint and publishes it out onto that Azure website. That part we're not open sourcing. That's actually our Extranet publisher. So it's not just taking the content and pushing it across. It's actually translating that content. It's doing things like building the roll-ups. It's building the term store navigation, the friendly URLs, you know, all those various different pieces get translated from SharePoint because when we're in Azure, we don't have SharePoint anymore and built in a way that it works on a .NET website from that point of view. And having said that, it doesn't need to run in Azure. You could run it on your own on-premises IIS server if you wanted to. Basically, anywhere you can run a Visual Studio .NET website, you're fine to do that from that point of view. So that's how that hangs together. So let me show you a bit under the hood on the Azure side. We've been talking a lot about these Azure websites. Let's just look at what they actually look like. Oops, wrong portal. Oops, I signed in as the wrong user. Hang on. too many identities going here. Let's do this one more time. Much better. Okay, so you'll see the section here on App Services. That's where you keep all of our websites. So I can pull down into here. Here's our Envision IT website. Here's our Extranet User Manager website. There's our Shakespeare website. So let's actually have a look at the Shakespeare one. So you do have the ability to put your own custom domain on there and your own SSL certificate. So we've gone ahead and done that. So if I come into the custom domain section, and when you first create the Azure website, it'll create a something.azurewebsites.net URL for you, and then you basically register in your DNS that we want it published on our own domain through there. And we upload the SSL certificate to say, hey, every website today should be on SSL. So we've actually set it to be on HTTPS only. So even if somebody hits it on HTTP, it bounces them over onto the SSL website. And that's something that's important from a public-facing website even now. Google actually penalizes you if you don't have your website on HTTPS from an SEO point of view. So come back to the overview here. So we've got our Azure website loaded up into there, and we can see here, oh, I thought it was on a standard 2. It's actually running on a standard 1. So, there is a virtual machine running underneath here. We can see the usage on the CPU, the memory, how much data is going in and out. So we do have visibility on what's happening in here, and we can make this bigger or smaller depending on how it's responding through here. And you can see here, there's a spike in the CPU basically every 15 minutes. That's when our publishing job is running to publish that content out. We are incremental. We look just for changes, but it does hit the server a little bit from that point of view. So you can see most of the time it's fairly lightly loaded from this perspective. You do have the ability to scale up and out. Scale up means I want a bigger server. Scale out means I want more servers. And you can actually set up automation on that. It's called auto scaling. So if your site suddenly takes a lot of traffic and the servers are getting hammered, you can set up rules that say if that happens, just start adding more servers so it can deal with that load. And it'll auto scale down as well. So when things get quiet, it'll start removing the servers. And the beauty of Azure is you literally pay by the hour for this usage. So if you know that on a particular day, we've got a couple of clients in the municipal space where on election day, their sites are getting hammered. People are looking for election results and things like that. Throw a whole bunch more servers on there, and when election day is over, take them off again. You only paid for them for that 24-hour period when you were using them, or even that 1 hour period. It's a very elastic solution from that point of view. So it's very nice from that perspective. And we can look, if we go into the scale up, it'll actually give me pricing information. So, if I choose the S1, I'm going to pay $114 per month for that. I go to S2, which is two cores instead of 1 and twice as much RAM. So it's basically 2 times the server, and it's pretty much 2 times the price through there. I can go bigger again from there. I can get into P series, which are even larger. So I have a lot of flexibility in the size of machines that I have. And then I can scale out saying, well, how many tiers do I want that to run on? Right now it's just running on 1 instance. Really, I should probably put it on 2 from a high availability point of view. And this is where you set up the auto scale as well. Now, also in here, the Extranet publisher itself, that application that takes the content from SharePoint and pushes it out to the website, is actually running in Azure itself as well. And it's set up as what's called a web job. So if I come back to my app service, I come down here to web jobs, I can see here's my web job. It last ran 13 minutes ago. It completed successfully, and it's set up to run on a 15-minute interval. So I can actually go into that, have a look at the logs for it. And I can see the history. So it takes about 2 minutes for this particular one to run through, and it's running successfully each time it goes through from that point of view. Like I said, it's skipping things that it doesn't need to redo. In fact, I can go into a particular instance here, and I can see the output that comes out of that console job that's doing the publishing. So if we start up at the top here, we can see, okay, well, it's looking for new documents, new images, new PDFs, things like that. It found a new couple of files in here, but it hasn't been modified since the last publish, so it just skips over it. So it is intelligent from that point of view. So it goes through all the various different files. Then it gets the term store, to build the friendly URLs. So it builds all these rewrite rules to say, okay, I need all these various different paths to be set up in there. Again, most of those exist. They don't need to be updated. We keep going down through here. There's a lot of those rewrite rules on this particular site. Oh, this is the Shakespeare one, right? There's a lot of content. Now it's going through each of the pages. It's taking those SharePoint pages and translating them into CSHTML, which is what the .NET website needs those pages to be in from a format point of view, and uploading those pages, processing all those friendly URLs, some image renditions and alerts and things like that, and it's done from there. So it took 2 minutes to go through that whole process. It's all done securely, so we use the Azure Key Vault to keep credentials to allow us to access the SharePoint Online to get the sites from there. We're actually thinking of open sourcing those pieces as well, because we think everybody should probably benefit from doing things better from a security point of view. We've got some interesting ideas around how we leverage both Key Vault and Windows Credential Manager on premises to make development more secure from that perspective. So that's sort of a technical overview. I hope I didn't lose too many of you geeking out on that, but I wanted to give a sense of what's happening under the hood and how that hangs together. Let me come back to my presentation here. So this is just some background slides, some more information on the Ontario MD side, some of the other applications that are being provided through single sign-on through there, and the results through that. So really, I've kind of got ahead of myself on the slide. We've gone through the Envision Shakespeare. I gave it the background on what that looks like. I didn't talk about the build of it. There is a full PowerShell build, uses the patterns and practices from Microsoft to allow you to deploy that site fairly easily to your SharePoint tenant. So it's nice and easy to get that up and running from that perspective. So as soon as that's ready, we'll send an email follow-up to everybody on this webinar, just letting them know that hey, the latest code is up there in GitHub and available to you to work with from there. This gives you an overview of what I was showing you from an information architecture point of view. You know, we've got works that can be either plays or poems that have acts and scenes associated with them. Those can have productions and performances as well. So there's a lot of interconnections between the various different metadata. And then we've got the news and the media kind of as separate standalone pieces there. So I've taken you through the publishing side of things. One of my goals that I didn't get to was to actually blend the Extranet User Manager login experience with the Shakespeare site, just to explain how that works together. Let me show you a little bit of that just to give you a sense of where we're going from that point of view. So when you purchase our Extranet User Manager product, one of the pieces that comes with that is an Azure .NET Core website that basically provides the end user pieces. So can I register? Can I update my profile, change my password, set my password, retrieve a forgotten password? All those end user extranet pieces are baked into this application. And we provide the source code for this app as part of your license for Extranet User Manager. And the goal from a demonstration point of view is to kind of link that with the Shakespeare content and say, okay, you know, if you were going to use our product to provide the sign-in experience and our publisher product, how would you mash that together and what would the end result of that look like? And it's really taking those two .NET Core website projects and merging them together, the Shakespeare content with the Extranet functionality from Extranet User Manager. So right now I'm actually running a local version of that product. So I can come in here, I can sign in. Actually, I think I'm running in the wrong browser right now. Let me just switch this over to my other browser profile. And I'll sign in here. So I've already created an account on the site. I won't take you through the registration onboarding process. It's very flexible. It can be tailored to either have an approval or not. You can define what fields you want to capture. And I'm actually going to show you a bit of how we tweak and modify that side of it. Okay, so I want to sign in with my email. Go ahead and log in. So right now it has all the branding of Extranet User Manager on it, but just like the Ontario MD or our sites, I mean, you would take that over and apply your own branding as part of that. But the user management functionality you kind of get for free as part of that. I can come in here and say, hey, I want to go to my profile, see my profile information. Because I'm running a local IIS version, each time I hit these pages when they're first getting hit, it always takes a little while to warm things up. But once you're under your production environment, these pages come up quite quickly and snappy from that point of view. So let's say I wanted to modify this profile page, and actually I left it in a modified state. So let me actually take that out for a second now. So I'm going to remove this section. I did a dry run and I forgot to step it back. So I just refreshed that page. Let me explain a bit what I just did there. So the page that we're looking at here, the registration fields and form layout that we have there is actually just a piece of HTML in the project. So if we start at the top here, we see our various different fields, first name, last name, email. It's all set up using Bootstrap, so it's responsive from a mobile point of view. So you see some div tags for the column formatting for setting things up from Bootstrap's perspective. And this is the out-of-the-box one that you get generically. Typically, people would remove the public profile in e-newsletter, put in their own fields as part of that. We leave them there as examples just to show you what's possible from that point of view. So the example that I was working through was to say, okay, let's actually add another item in here called your favorite Shakespeare play. So it's just something we want to capture for people to enter in what their favorite play is. So if I go ahead and save that and refresh, I've added it in just above the public profile, so we now have a new field in here. And it could be a drop down, it could be a number field, a text field, what have you from that point of view. And you're probably saying, well, where does this actually get saved? How do we record that? What sort of work do we need to do on the back end side? So let me flip over to the SQL database for a minute. So what I have open here is the underlying SQL database that Extranet User Manager uses for all of its setup as well as all of its user and role information. And we have a user table that keeps all the standard profile information about every user that's in the system. We also have this table called User Extra. So if we have a look and design that table for a minute here, you'll see I don't have a spot for that new field to fit into. So what I need to do is add a new column into that table. Let me just grab the values for that. So we're going to call that column favorite play. For some reason that's not pasting for me. Okay, I'll just type it in. And we'll just make that a varchar 200, so a string that holds 200 characters. Oh, wait a minute, I think I just pasted that in a whole bunch of times. Let me just say no there. What is it doing? That's better. I think it was pasting character returns. That's how I wasn't seeing it. Okay, let me save that. So the key here is that I've named the field in this database table the same as I've named the field here on my form. So as long as I have those two names the same, and I've got a little data-extra tag here that says, hey, it's an extra field for user, that is all I need to do to wire things together. It gets packaged up by our JavaScript, sent through an API securely, written to the database. You don't need to worry about that middle plumbing that happens through there. So if I come back to my page now, and do one last refresh there, I say, well, not much to do about nothing. I like the light, fluffy comedy, Shakespeare. Go ahead and update that. I've committed that record back. Let me go back into SQL here, and I can actually look at that table. So let me just edit the top 200 rows. And you can see there's my record for me logged in as peter@envision.com, and that favorite play field has now gotten filled in. In fact, if I come back here and go back to home for a minute and just go back to my profile, boom, it's loaded that in. So I've round-tripped that data on the read and the write side very easily through there. So it's just an example of how easy it is to update the profile information in there. And the same thing can be done on the registration side. If you've got particular fields that you want to capture on registration, they can be different than in the profile. They don't have to match one for one all the way through there. It's very easy to extend the product from that point of view. So just imagine that we've now layered the Shakespeare content on that. We now have a Shakespeare site where people can sign into, they can maintain their profile. Now we can do things like, liking and commenting that maybe you don't want to do fully anonymously on your site. So it just gives you some examples of what that can look like. So that's where things are going. That's really the introduction to our Extranet Publisher product. Let me actually bring you back to our UM website for a minute here. Just want to show you some additional resources that we've got on that side. So there is a section at the top called Publisher here. Gives you some details of what are some of the things that it's doing, what features is it providing. Here's an example from the Ontario MD scenario of what it looks like. And then we've also got a pricing page here as well. So from a pricing perspective, we've taken the same model as our Extranet User Manager product. It is a monthly subscription. We have different tiers on the User Manager product. For Publisher, we just have the one tier. It's $250 per month, regardless of quantity of pages that you're publishing or scale of the site or number of users coming in. It's really to provide that publishing job process. There's implementation services typically involved in this. We can do those services for you, or if you have .NET developers, SharePoint developers that are comfortable doing that kind of work, more than happy to work with those and support them to explain how to wire this all together. And that's really the goal of the Shakespeare site, is to say, well, here's an example you can look at as to how it's done, and now you can then use that to tailor your own approach from there. So a couple of links here. I'm going to update actually a few more links onto here before we publish the deck up. And that's really it. This is actually out of date. I meant to update the upcoming events. We actually have a webinar coming in January as well. So let me just bring that up on here. Let people know about that. I'm actually going to be speaking, if you're in the Toronto area, at Microsoft Ignite. So they're taking Ignite on the road, hitting different cities. Toronto is one of them. I'm going to be talking about our site provisioning process that we've done a lot of work on. Also another open source project that we have. If you're interested in that, have a look in our resources article section. There's lots of content from that point of view. And then end of January, we actually have Brock Allen, who's an expert on single sign-on, talking about the technology behind it, how that works, some of the underlying pieces of OpenID Connect. So he's actually one of the co-authors of Identity Server, which is the underlying open source project that we use for Extranet User Manager. So it provides the OpenID Connect, SAML, WS Federation, single sign-on technology that's sort of the core key piece of Extranet User Manager. So it'd be great to have him kind of walk us through what that looks like. He is going to take a fairly technical approach, but he's not going to get too much down into code. It's going to be more conceptual from that point of view. So give you a good understanding of how that all hangs together. So a couple of interesting things coming out over the next little while. I see that I'm almost at the top of the hour from there. So from there, Amanda or Logan, I don't know if there's particular questions that people ask going through. I didn't get a chance to look and see. If not, then I think we're all wrapped, and want to wish everybody a great rest of your day and week, and happy holidays.